quick. Watch this, guys. Now, this is when Canada tripped herself, and Caitlin Clark was literally bagging back, giving her room to go because she was already at what? 4 fouls or something like that. 4 fouls. Now what?
Take another look at that sequence. Caitlin Clark isn't simply asking for a review. She's pointing toward the replay board, breaking down exactly what she saw, doing everything she can to convince the officials and her coach to challenge the call. Meanwhile, Stephanie White barely acknowledges her, keeping her focus elsewhere. In just those few seconds, you can see a much bigger story unfolding in Indiana. And the most interesting part, this wasn't some isolated incident. Similar moments have surfaced throughout the season, turning what looked like a single disagreement into a trend that's become impossible to ignore.
Stephanie White wasted a challenge on Sophie Cunningham. To me, her not using any challenges for Caitlin Clark completely is the reason why they lost this game. Caitlin Clark did not play majority of the fourth quarter. She came in, there's 3 minutes and 28 seconds left. She got in foul trouble early. I think she had 3 fouls going into the third quarter. So that there was a telltale sign that, yeah, maybe I need to keep a challenge because they clearly have.
Indiana's 4-game winning streak came to an end with a loss to the Atlanta Dream, but the final score doesn't tell the whole story. One detail that barely shows up in the stat sheet is the fact that Caitlin Clark spent most of the fourth quarter on the bench. She didn't return until there were just 3 minutes and 28 seconds remaining. The reason? Foul trouble. After entering the second half with 3 fouls, Clark was hit with a controversial 4th foul, forcing Indiana to keep its biggest star on the sidelines while the momentum shifted and the game started slipping away. And that's where things become even more frustrating for Fever fans. Stephanie White still had a coach's challenge available. She had the opportunity to take a closer look at those disputed calls and potentially erase one of the fouls on Clark. But instead of using it to protect her franchise player, the challenge was spent on a play involving Sophie Cunningham, not Caitlin Clark. Sophie Cunningham. That decision has left plenty of fans questioning what could have been done differently.
So that kind of answers the question earlier about that challenge that you asked, because
I just wasn't a fan of it at that time for a play that to us at the time. I mean, think about how long that review went.
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't cut and dry, and now you've got one of your best players sitting on the bench with 5 personals.
Even the announcers had to call out.
Even the broadcast crew sounded stunned by what they were seeing. During the game, the announcers openly questioned why the Fever's coaching staff wasn't using a challenge on calls that appeared highly questionable against their biggest star. That kind of criticism from commentators in real time is rare. It usually takes something truly controversial before they're willing to call it out on the air, and the timing made the situation even harder to ignore. With just 52 seconds remaining in the half, Caitlin Clark was already dealing with 3 fouls when Alyssa Gray appeared to lose her balance and go down on her own. Clark was already retreating on defense and didn't seem to make any contact, yet the whistle still sounded, saddling her with another foul. That felt like the perfect moment to use a challenge. It was the type of call that practically demanded a second look. The problem? Stephanie White had already burned her challenge earlier in the game on a play that had very little impact, one that was reviewed and resolved almost immediately. By the time the questionable foul on Clark happened, Indiana no longer had any way to fight it, leaving fans and commentators alike wondering why the challenge hadn't been saved for a much more critical moment.
Now, starting during her last years in Iowa, Caitlin Clark seemed destined to follow a similar journey to icon status. Her start to her WNBA career has already been record-setting. The only thing she was lacking, though, was that long-awaited signature shoe. Well, guess what? It dropped today. Check out Nike's Caitlin 1. And you see those stacked swooshes over there? You see how they're look like C's? Well, Nike says they were designed to mimic her initials, which you see up on the tongue, and then even the nodes on the outside also look like C's. Now, Clark becomes the 5th active WNBA player.
The discussion has grown so noticeable that even Sports Illustrated recently weighed in on the issue. In an article by Robin Lundberg, the spotlight was placed on the unique challenges that come with coaching Caitlin Clark, and the questions surrounding Stephanie White's use of coaches' challenges. This wasn't coming from a random voice online. It was one of the biggest names in sports media taking a closer look at decisions involving the Fever and their franchise player. The piece highlighted several moments throughout the season where White had opportunities to contest questionable foul calls involving Clark, but chose not to use a review. And according to the article, these weren't isolated situations. Similar scenarios have surfaced in multiple games, creating what many observers now view as a recurring trend rather than a one-off occurrence. That growing pattern has sparked increasing debate among fans and analysts alike about how those key moments have been handled.
Not be able to buy them until October. Michael Jordan.
So that was ESPN letting us know that Caitlin Clark is one of them ones. Now, this is a controversial person right here. A lot of people don't like him. Even me, I don't really care for him, but he do make good articles for Sports Illustrated. That is Robin Lundberg. So Robin Lundberg is getting off the bandwagon, and he wrote an article today. He says, coaching Caitlin Clark come with challenges. Stephanie White can't hold to them. Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White could stand to use some of her challenges on the calls made against who? Caitlin Clark. He goes on to say, coaching...
From a strategic standpoint, this is what has so many people scratching their heads. Throughout the season, there's been constant debate over the way Caitlin Clark is officiated, with critics arguing that she often gets whistled for light contact while absorbing plenty of physical play on the other end without the same calls. It's been one of the most talked about storylines surrounding Indiana all year. Because of that, you would expect the Fever's coaching staff to enter each game knowing there's a good chance a questionable foul on their star point guard could become a major issue. In that situation, preserving a coach's challenge for a key moment would seem like the logical approach. You don't want to spend it early on a relatively minor sequence involving a role player if there's a strong possibility you'll need it later to protect the centerpiece of your franchise. That's why these decisions have drawn so much attention. Many fans and analysts believe those challenge opportunities should be reserved for moments involving Caitlin Clark, especially when a controversial whistle could dramatically change the flow of a game. Yet time and time again, the choices being made have fueled more questions than answers, creating a pattern that has become increasingly difficult to ignore.
Play pulled up for y'all.
Still goes against Caitlin Clark. What are these refs even watching right now?
Look, yep.
Canada slips and hits the floor, but the whistle...
So that was this play right here. Now, Caitlin Clark is storming. Telling Stephanie, she's yelling. She's definitely yelling at Stephanie and them to challenge the play. To me, based on the evidence, based on everything that has happened this season, by them not challenging Caitlin plays.
And this is where the conversation becomes even more intriguing. If you go back and examine the season game by game, one question immediately stands out. Can you find a single example of Stephanie White using a coach's challenge to erase a foul on Caitlin Clark? Many fans have searched for that moment and continue to point out that they haven't seen it happen. What makes the situation even more notable is that the video evidence shows Clark repeatedly trying to advocate for herself. Time after time, she can be seen heading toward the bench, pointing to the replay screen, breaking down what she believes happened, and urging for a review. Yet those requests rarely seem to result in a challenge. It hasn't been just an occasional occurrence either. Similar scenes have played out throughout the season, leading many observers to wonder why those opportunities haven't been used to keep Indiana's biggest star out of foul trouble.
Challenges when it comes to Clark, specifically not using her coach's challenges on fouls called against the star point guard. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Stephanie White has ever used a challenge on one of Caitlin Clark's challenges this entire season. I don't think she used one specifically for a Caitlin foul. Goes on to say, this stood out in the team's loss against Atlanta Dream. One that saw Caitlin Clark have to sit for a stretch in the fourth quarter due to foul trouble. There was a clear instance toward the end of the first half where White should have challenged a foul against Caitlin Clark with 52 seconds left. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken...
Now, take a closer look at what unfolded after the Alyssa Gray sequence. The moment the whistle blew, Caitlin Clark appeared convinced the call was wrong. From her perspective, Gray had simply lost her footing, so Clark immediately headed toward Stephanie White, hoping the play would be reviewed. If you watch the exchange closely, White's reaction stands out. There's little hesitation and almost no sign that a challenge is even being considered. The discussion seems to end almost as soon as it begins. What Clark likely didn't realize at that instant was that Indiana no longer had a challenge available. Stephanie White had already used it earlier on a play involving Sophie Cunningham, a review that many felt was straightforward and took considerable time despite appearing clear from the start. So by the time Clark came to the bench looking for help on what she believed was another questionable whistle, there was no safety net left. The challenge had already been spent, leaving the Fever without a way to contest one of the most important calls of the game.
Fighting back towards Caitlin by not challenging her plays, putting her in bad situations, taking her on the ball, off the ball, using Kelsey Mitchell, running it with Kelsey Mitchell, and that could be a strong reason as to why they're not challenging the plays, man. There's no other reason. Caitlin Clark wants out of Indy, and the Indy front office knows it. I am 100% convinced. You can't sit up here and tell me that if your star player on any level of sports, and you got a chance to challenge a play, and you don't challenge that play against the best player on your team, you don't like the best player on your team, and you want them in foul trouble. You don't want them in the game. That's the only answer. Stephanie White, the front office, don't want Caitlin in the game because Caitlin don't want to be in Indiana. That's the only explanation I could think of. Get down in the comment section right now. Let me know y'all thoughts about this. Keep them bells on. And until next time, man, shake the damn.
So now we arrive at the question nobody really wants to ask. Why does this continue to happen? Why does Indiana's head coach repeatedly find herself without a challenge when Caitlin Clark, the face of the franchise, is battling questionable foul trouble? Why do these moments keep showing up over and over again? There are a couple of ways people have tried to explain it. One possibility is simple. Perhaps Stephanie White's in-game decision-making has been inconsistent. Her challenge usage has sparked criticism all season, and there have been times when substitutions, rotations, and late-game decisions have left fans scratching their heads. Some observers believe those coaching choices have directly contributed to losses in games Indiana could have won. But even that explanation raises another question. Regardless of whether a coach is having a great season or a difficult one, protecting your star player from unnecessary foul trouble is generally considered a priority. That's not some advanced tactical concept. It's one of the most basic responsibilities in managing a game. Then there's another line of speculation that has emerged among fans. Could there be factors behind the scenes that outsiders simply aren't aware of? Is there tension within the organization? Are there disagreements about the future? Nobody outside the Fever knows the answers to those questions, and there's no public evidence suggesting Caitlin Clark has requested a trade or rejected a long-term commitment. But whenever people see repeated decisions they can't explain, speculation naturally follows. Some have also pointed to offensive adjustments as part of the conversation. At times, Indiana has placed more responsibility on players like Kelsey Mitchell, while Clark's role and usage have fluctuated. Supporters who want the ball in Clark's hands as much as possible have questioned whether those changes are purely basketball decisions or something else entirely. Whether that criticism is fair or not, it reflects the frustration many fans are feeling, and that's why the challenge issue has become such a focal point. Time after time, controversial whistles involving Clark have led to visible reactions from both the player and the fan base. Time after time, people have watched her plead her case, and time after time, the challenge either wasn't available or wasn't used. Eventually, fans stop viewing those moments as isolated incidents and start seeing them as part of a larger pattern. The unfortunate reality is that nobody benefits from this. It affects Clark, who wants to be on the floor helping her team win. It affects Indiana, because every unnecessary foul and every lost possession can swing close games. It affects the fans, who came to watch the league's biggest attraction and instead find themselves seeing her spend crucial stretches on the bench. And it affects the WNBA itself, because whenever one of its most recognizable stars becomes the center of controversy, the conversation shifts away from basketball. So what should happen next? If you're Caitlin Clark, do you continue trusting the process and keep pushing forward? Do you address these concerns privately with the coaching staff? Or do you simply focus on basketball and let your play do the talking? Because at the heart of all of this is something bigger than a coach's challenge. It's about trust. A player has to believe the coaching staff is in her corner, and a coach has to have the confidence of her players. Once that bond starts to weaken, repairing it becomes incredibly difficult. What do you think? Are these simply coaching mistakes that have been magnified under the spotlight? Or do you believe there's a deeper issue at work in Indiana? And if you're a Fever fan, how long should the organization wait before making changes? Share your thoughts below.